Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Home Cookin'. You got the chef Alan over here, and we also have the blessed.
Leska. And today we got some special items on the menu. We're going to hit it off with some talk about mental health because we believe that's something we all need to have a conversation about. And secondly, we're going to wrap up our thoughts about the NBA bubble. And finally, we're going to have our overtime period where we get to speak our minds. So, Alan, let's start off with you.
Yeah, so Bleska, one of the big topics that not that many people like to talk about or even consider for the most part is the topic of mental health, right? And I'm sure that you can relate to, and I'm sure the most of the listeners can relate to as well. We live in such a crazy time that it can be very easy to neglect your mental health, right? And just speaking off of the top of my head, it was crazy how just the other day I was just walking down like in my neighborhood with my friend, and we encountered this one lady who was just mentioning how she feels sorry for the people and the youth nowadays who are struggling with so many things because of how the world is. And one of the things that she mentions is that mental health is not really something many people talk about. And it reminded me of myself in the sense that sometimes I feel that I'm not even keeping track of my mental health. And I know that it can be a struggle, and a lot of people are going through a lot of things, but I think that just in general, we have to find ways to reach out to people and just check in to make sure that everything is okay. Because I think that if you're able to do something for someone else to show that they're like show them some care, it will help lessen the burden that maybe they're carrying, right? And I don't know about you, Bleska, but what can you say on the topic?
Yeah, it's a turbulent times right now, so whether your job was affected, whether it something happened with your family, whether it's just internal energy that you have to deal with because, at the end of the day, we spent a lot of time by ourselves as of late, and now we're trying to go back into a regular routine, but nonetheless, there are conversations that you must have with yourself, looking in the mirror. And I'm lucky enough to have a lot of friends that, are in my corner like you that I can always call up, but not everybody is comfortable enough to, open that door of conversation, and partially because of the stigma, but that's also because, sometimes the court's not open for that, So
Mhm.
even with the youth, especially with the kids, they were isolated from their friends, isolated from their daily routine, and that's not even a conversation we often have just in terms of dealing with it. So, uh, Alan and I hope to give some tips and just bring some light, shed some light on a dark cloud.
Yeah, yeah, no, I feel that's very relatable, and I'm glad you talked about the idea of the stigma, right? Because you hear about this so often in so many different like contexts, and I'll pass it on to you after because I know that yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts when it comes to like athlete mental health and your mental health in relation to just being in a sports setting. But what I wanted to say is that like when it comes to the stigma, and this is what the lady too that me and our friend David encountered the other day, and she was talking about how with regards to mental health, especially for like guys, right? Because for the most part, most guys are not talking about like issues that go on with them, and they're not opening up about stuff that they could be dealing with. And to be honest, I've actually experienced it in the way that I've seen it in other people, and I can relate to it too because I used to do that in high school and in university, just carrying stuff for probably more than you should, and just waiting, like just hoping that things would get better, but you just let it drag on and on and on. And then I've seen it in some people where, like, if you just hold it up too long, it just blows up, right? And sometimes it blows up on the wrong person, and sometimes we don't know what people can be going through. And obviously, this time it's super hectic. But even then, if you just look at it at the other level, where like there's like half the population in the sense that they're not very accustomed to being able to do that and open up whenever they're dealing with stuff, right? Because they don't want to be judged or like yeah, took in a different way, right? But I think before I pass it on to you, Bleska, I just want to say I think it's important that you keep track of where you are mentally, especially during this time, and especially for the listeners. If you need someone to talk to, just find that person because I'm sure that everyone has one person, and even if you can't see that at the moment, just see if you can just pry and just ask someone and then just slowly creep towards a question where you open up to them about the issue that you could be carrying and maybe you'll actually try to contact us because you know we're two guys that are open about trying to make the world a little bit better, right? So but Blasky, tell me about you, man. Tell me about athletes, tell me about everything.
Yeah, absolutely. As an athlete, it takes a lot of weight. It's a lot of weight to carry, especially when you put a lot of pressure on yourself and just external pressures that might not even be directly put on by you. And so it's really great to see that just generally the athletic community is one place where they've really made a point to try and make sure that athletes are being heard, especially teams are hiring sports psychologists and then, giving athletes different methods to cope and release some of that energy. Like, for example, there's guys that take up yoga, meditation, and you can see even LeBron James when he's reading his book or when he's, you know, uh, doing the commercials for the Calm Mind app. Now, there's different segues, especially when it's directed to athletes that you can take to cope, but at the same time, we got to make sure there's a proper environment for, we see how, for example, Dak Prescott came out and spoke about his mental health and how tough it was for him during the quarantine, especially with personal aspects and that were not related to football. Then you can see how like the negative feedback he was getting from a guy like Skip Bayless, a guy that's on the center stage that would say that the quarterback of America's team can't show weakness, and that goes back to just the age old rhetoric that you can't show weakness, but we're not all able to, you know, withstand the boulders or, the burdens on our own shoulders. And the lighter the load, the easier for you it is to be strong. Sometimes opening up and letting go of, that age old rhetoric once again opens you up to carry more positive things. And so we all advise our friends, our people that you don't know, anybody in the world that's really feeling as if there's no way out. You gotta take the proper steps. There's helplines. There's different ways to ensure that, and most of all, as Alan said, try to open up because it's easy to restrain yourself right now.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, just to wrap this up a bit, I think it's something people have to be mindful of, right? And if someone, and this is for anyone who listens, just keep in mind that if someone actually wants to open up to you, you should be obviously like you should be a little bit more open to it because it shows that they want to confide in you, right? So that means they trust you in a sense. And a lot of the time it can be very difficult to trust people. And I literally just wrote an article about this not too long ago. But yeah, like it's hard to trust people. And sometimes people who have had their trust broken take a long time to try to get it back. And yeah, so if they're trusting you with something so huge that they're dealing with, like a backpack full of heavy books that you can't see, right? Just make the effort to try to help them out. That's what I would close it off with. But
And
plus,
I'd like to add that all our burns are unique, you know. So being mindful of that, just because you're able to go in through day in and day out and, put something aside, it doesn't mean that it's for everybody, and not everybody can handle those things, similarly. And so with that in mind, it makes you really able to look at, you know, the mental health aspect of, relationships through a different lens, that of mindfulness, as you say.